Good afternoon. I guess it is good afternoon. Yes, it's good afternoon. How is everyone doing? My name is Jason. Here we are. It is the Painfully Honest Tech. Well, I just finished my coffee, so it's Friday morning beverage with Painfully Honest Tech. And today we're going to talk about some interesting things. But first, let's have a little shout out. Who's out there in the chat right now? We got Michael Pepper Tech. We got Khalil. We got Serge. We got Sorab is here. Who else? I see that we got Top 40 Hub is here. And Muhammad with a $13.99 Canadian dollar super chat. Yes, they can using AirPlay. If you go to the support website and click on the AirPlay on AirPods section, you can see that the link is dead. That's odd. Well, that's part of what I want to talk about here today, because one of the most asked questions that I've had so far is whether or not the AirPods can play Apple wireless files in ever. Can they ever play Apple wireless files? And so we're gonna get into that for sure. And Muhammad is on the right track, but it's not as simple as all that. Bob, good morning to you. Mustafa, Jimmy, good morning to you. Adam, good to see you. So yeah, I really appreciate that super chat, man. I really do. Thank you very much for that. Super chats are always open. You know, if you ever feel like throwing one in there, if you have a burning question or something that you want to make sure gets stated on the stream, that's always the easiest way to do it. I'm not saying that I won't say what you have to say, but you know, sometimes the chat gets going fast and furious, and it's just not as easy to see everything. So but super chats pop out and they look different, and they say dollars on them and other currencies, whatever the other currencies are. Alejandro, thank you for this past week. The Tuesday stream was interesting. We had Andrew Edwards and Viper on, and we talked about this whole lossless audio and whether or not it matters that the AirPods can't play the lossless files over Bluetooth. So yeah, it was a very interesting discussion. Andrew's always he's been around this game for a long time, so he has a much deeper relationship with the companies, has more of an idea of what goes on within the companies and that kind of thing, and so he's much more probably fair and balanced than I am. I tend to get a little bit emotional about these things because they they bother me. So yeah, it's interesting to have both those kinds of opinions floating around. So yeah, it was a fun stream for sure. Gwendolyn, good morning to you. Jaime, good morning to you. Bob's right. I mean, they should just bring back the headphone jack. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if Apple could just say, "Hey, we're making some premium wired headphones that will be, as you know, Apple branded and all the goodness that comes with that, but also sound as amazing as some of the other stuff that you can get out there in the world." But unfortunately, we are never getting the headphone jack back. And yeah, which man just bothers me. It bothers me that it ever went away. I've sort of gone on record. This is to me like the whole reason. This is the whole reason that you don't get rid of the headphone jack, because eventually you're going to have to walk backwards and say, "Oh, well, yeah, we could have delivered that service to you had we not, done that other thing before." And whether or not, I think that was part of the thing too, Adam, is that back in the day, I remember a lot of discussion about how phones were going to get thinner, and so since they were going to get thinner, the headphone jack was going to be a problem in terms of interior space. Not that they would get so thin that there wouldn't be not so thin that there wouldn't be a space for the headphone jack, but just that the real estate inside the phones would be they would need that space. which I think we've come to understand is not necessarily the case. I mean, they can get all of those things, all of those things in there, and still have the headphone jack if they wanted to. If they wanted to, but as much as I sound like a conspiracy theorist or whatever, Apple really did, have an ulterior motive for removing the headphone jack, and it wasn't courage. It was to sell a bunch of headphones, wireless headphones that they were developing, and they were released like not too long after the headphone jack went away. Gordy says I should get Juan Bagnell and John Darko on a podcast. That would be great. That would be great. I don't know John. I know his stuff. I don't know him personally. But Juan I've known for quite a while. So that would be a conversation for sure. Yeah, because what I'm hoping to do at this point is not only to sort of talk about what Apple's products can't do, but help people figure out what they can do to get the most out of this Apple lossless product. So I don't know if you've seen the video that I put out yesterday, but it's basically just like a sort of primer on what do you need to start to get into the lossless game. Now, all of those things that I put in the video won't go all the way up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz quality. They'll go to like 96 or something like that, which, I mean, the difference between 96 and 128 is negligible at best, but still, they'll go to 196. Some of them will go all the way up to 128. But I wanted to give people an idea of what they should be looking at to purchase if they really wanted to get into the lossless audio game. And I've been reaching out to companies, talking to them about DACs and amps and that kind of stuff that I could bring to the folks and talk about how to do this the right way. So yeah. And Khalil, you bring up the thing that is most frustrating to me. One thing about leakers is that they can say basically whatever they want, and it's, I mean, John is a friend. It's quite possible somebody at Apple or somebody Apple adjacent may have said something like this to him. But John, for all the things that he is good at, I don't think he knows a whole lot about like consumer hi-fi audio. So here's the crux of the issue. The way that the AirPods are built right now, and the way that they get their audio from a device is it's sort of just one kind of technology. There is a Bluetooth can't do it. So if you're Bluetooth connected from your iPhone to your if you're connected from your iPhone to your Bluetooth or to your iPhone AirPods, then you're getting a Bluetooth connection. That's it. You can connect via the cable that they sell for $40, but the $40 cable is 3.5 millimeter to Lightning. Lightning is a digital connection, so there's a digital conversion that has to happen there. And when that does, it downsamples anything that you put through it to 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, which means it's no longer like lossless. You've lost something. You've gone from 192 kilohertz to 48, and so it's not necessarily lossless. It will likely sound better. I haven't obviously had the chance to test that, but when it comes to that, I mean, as Gwendolyn says here, as Andrew said, I think the only wireless headphones that Apple sells at this point are the EarPods, the old EarPods, and those are now, and those are Lightning. So there will be that conversion with those, and then Beats EP, which are, I think, are those the on the ear headphones, like the cheaper ones? Both of those are not going to sound good, no matter what kind of file you're playing through them. The Beats EP actually aren't terrible, but they're not a high fidelity, kind of headphone, so they're not going to sound fantastic. So yes, Apple doesn't really sell any headphone at this point that can just from the get-go give you lossless audio just like from the start. Okay, so I believe that with the Beats, like the Beats Pro, I believe actually the Beats Pro, if they're still even available, I haven't seen them in a store advertised or anything for a long time. But the ones that are like made out of metal, those are wired headphones as far as I remember. So those would do it. But they aren't that great. They're still like vestigial from the old Beats. Beats has improved since Apple bought them in terms of the sound signature, but they're still the old Beats. So they're not terrible. They're not great. Anything that I suggest for a lot less money in the video that I made yesterday would be better. So the studio wireless, anything that you can go 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter should give you the ability to go lossless. As long as your source, whether your iPhone or whatever, your source can send that signal, then anything that's 3.5 millimeter to 3.5 millimeter should give you lossless capabilities. Now, is that the case? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. So that's the thing. But so as John Prosser has said, I guess I think it was GadgetCast, maybe he said it on Front Page Tech, I don't know. In the future, they may be able to use Wi-Fi. Now, here's the thing. We're talking about AirPlay. I'm gonna put this up. So here we have a description of AirPlay and AirPlay 2. Now, this is a longer description than what we really need for this discussion, but AirPlay 2 is basically the way that Apple gives you wireless whole home audio. You can send audio to devices that are hooked up to your Wi-Fi in your home and get AirPlay. Now, one thing that's interesting to me, so I need to dig into this further, is that the HomePods were also most definitely said to not be capable of doing lossless audio. And the HomePods work with AirPlay 2. So I'm a little bit confused because what most people are talking about when they say, the most people are talking about when they say that Wi-Fi will be a possibility, they're talking about AirPlay. And it's quite possible that AirPlay could work. I mean, you can hook up your headphones to your Apple TV via AirPlay and listen to whatever's coming through your Apple TV. That's a thing that can happen, right? So it's quite possible. But the thing about AirPlay is it is connected to your wireless router, and it can connect to anything else that can accept an AirPlay, I guess, like cookie or whatever it is that they say. It can connect to anything that's on that wireless router system, but nothing else. So you couldn't go to the mall and connect to the mall's Wi-Fi and get wireless from your iPhone. It doesn't work that way because that stuff isn't that stuff is not a closed system like your home Wi-Fi would be. So at best, as I currently understand the possibilities for playing this stuff, playing lossless audio over Wi-Fi, at best, you might be able to play lossless audio from Apple Music through Wi-Fi via AirPlay 2, and that would only be in your home. Now, I don't know what kind of processors are in the AirPods. I don't know what kind of processors are in the HomePods. I don't know what kind of processors are in there. I don't know if the kind of conversion that needs to be made is even possible. Now, it doesn't see the headphones will already work with Wi-Fi, so it's possible, right? However, to me, that's still not really supporting this the service, because the whole thing about a music streaming service is the portability, right? The whole thing about a wireless headphone is the portability, the ability to go all over the place and do what you want and have lossless files. Now, are you going to be able to enjoy lossless audio sitting, on the bus? Probably not. It's not the best place to do that. But if we're going to answer the question, can Apple get lossless audio to the AirPods? The answer is maybe, probably, in a limited fashion, if they can do it via AirPlay 2. However, I figure, like, when they came out with the HomePods, they already told us what the HomePods would be capable of doing when AirPlay 2 was released, and it wasn't released until after the HomePods had been out for a while, right? So now we have AirPlay 2, it's already existing. I would have to think that if there was a hope of any kind of lossless audio, that Apple would say, in the future, lossless audio will be supported via AirPlay 2 on your AirPods Max or whatever. But they haven't said that. They, in fact, have said pretty definitively that they won't support the Apple lossless audio. And so, regardless of whatever rumors, leaks, or otherwise that people are, pulling out of the air or whatever, knowing what I know about how audio works, which isn't a small amount, and knowing what I know about how this whole Apple ecosystem of like devices talking to one another works, I can't see a really satisfying implementation of Wi-Fi lossless audio happening. I mean, in the chat, tell me, like, with a Y or an N, would you be satisfied only being able to listen to lossless audio on your $550 headphones when connected to your Wi-Fi system in your home? Or would you prefer to be able to do it wherever else? I mean, to me, I wouldn't want to have to hook up a different way every time I wanted to listen to lossless audio. So, yeah, I don't know. And see, Bob, everybody keeps saying they're going to come out with some kind of AirPods Super Duper Max Wireless or Pro Max or whatever. Everybody's saying that that's going to be the thing. However, like, unless they have a whole new way of communicating from whatever device to the headphones, then there's not. They're not going to be able to do it wirelessly. They are going to have to they're going to have to use a cable and plug it into something and figure out a way to make that conversion not lossy. So, I mean, Sean, there's not necessarily an option for both. Sorry, it always moves when I'm trying to select somebody. There's not necessarily an option for both right now, but I guess John Prosser has been shouting to the heavens that there's going to be some way. And knowing what I know about how this stuff works, if there is a way, it will be very limited, and to me, it would be very unsatisfactory. Processor was also referring to the fact that Apple said it currently doesn't support it, as if it might in the future. I think that was partially what he was basing it on. I mean, it currently doesn't support it because it's impossible. If they can get AirPlay working, then it could possibly. But that's a long shot, and I just don't really see it happening. Michael Pepper says, I know that AirPlay can support Wi-Fi direct connection because I can cast from my iPhone, iPad to my Apple TV without a Wi-Fi network via directly casting to the Apple TV. But the thing is, like, when you cast to the Apple TV, it's using your Wi-Fi network as a bridge. As far as I understand how it's working, like, your Apple TV is connected to your wireless network, and your phone is connected to the wireless network, and they see each other, and that's how that connection is made. That's how I understand it working. Yates is here. Good to see you, man. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. So ultimately, the answer is probably not to this question. And this is where I get really frustrated with people who give out leaks, because it doesn't cost a leaker anything to say maybe, or I think it might do it someday. It doesn't cost them anything to think it, but the thing about it is, the person who's on the other end, the people who are listening, I mean, they might hear that and then extrapolate it through, all the different games of telephone, and extrapolate it out to Apple's going to add this feature. And I honestly don't think that Apple's going to be able to add this feature in any kind of significant, satisfactory way. Well, Khalil says, it's unfortunate. I guess they assume you'll have dedicated set of headphones for high quality listening. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, you certainly won't, because what are you going to plug into? What are you going to plug into to listen to high quality stuff? Because Apple told us back in 2017 to get rid of all that stuff, right? Apple told us to get rid of all that stuff. Wi-Fi was the way to go. Wireless was the way to go. And so there, it's gone. So yeah, I think Apple is assuming that you won't know the difference, and you won't really care, because you'll be able to listen to something. You'll be able to listen to, the, I don't know, spatial audio. You'll be able to listen to all the stuff that has more wow factor to it than lossless audio does. And their thinking is probably that most people will be satisfied with that, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think that they don't assume that there are going to be very many people in the Apple ecosystem who really want to get connected to the lossless thing. To me, it's a real oversight on their part. They're kind of assuming that their customer base is dumb, and I don't like that. So Michael says, I can do it without a local network. I can take my Apple TV and iPhone out to a cabin, no local network, and use AirPlay. That's the benefit over something like the Chromecast. Okay, I've never done that. I didn't know that was possible. So whether or not that's possible, I mean, are they connecting via Bluetooth? That's the only other way I can think that they would connect, would be via Bluetooth. And so if that's what's happening, then again, we have the problem of not being able to listen to the lossless audio. But I don't know. I've never used an Apple TV and an iPhone in that configuration, so I'm not sure. Prosser's always betting on something, and if he's right and I'm wrong, I'll never hear the end of it. But I'm not basing my opinion on anything other than what I know about audio technology, and whether or not it seems to be what it seems to be capable of doing. I mean, we know that Bluetooth can't do it, so yeah. Tech nerd asks, am I crazy? But I have tried wired Apple earbuds and they sound better than my AirPods Pro. You're crazy. Yeah. Um, your AirPods Pro maybe not aren't like sitting on your head correctly or something. There's always going to be a difference in how something sounds when you have in-ear when you have like in-ear earbuds or something like that versus like on the ear headphones. There's always going to be a difference in sound, but I don't the earpods never got as much credit as I thought they deserved because the original earpods were just terrible. They were like super cheap, terrible headphones. And then Apple spent a bunch of time and a bunch of money redesigning the earpods so that they could then sound better. I remember Steve Jobs talking about this in whatever showcase they were doing that had this discussion. The stalks that everybody makes fun of on the AirPods and on the EarPods were actually designed as bass reflex tubes. So there's like some acoustic engineering going on there that makes them sound better than really they should. But the AirPods Max should sound better, or the AirPods Pro should sound better than those. But I mean, it could also be personal taste. So let me see. David says, more likely we'll get an Apple DAC for AirPods Max, and being realistic, can AirPods generate the quality of sound from the AirPod anyway? I don't know that. I mean, the DAC is already in there. That's the problem. I mean, the DAC is either in the cable or in the headphone, right? So you'd have to bypass one of the two of those things, and both of those things have an effect on the digital signal. So I don't know that a separate DAC is really going to solve the problem in any significant way, other than to separate people for more of their money. And Galacity Gaming sorry, says Apple should build Audiophile DAC directly into Pro device as well. Yes, they should. And when it comes to stuff like the MacBooks and the iMacs and the stuff that does have a headphone jack, the headphone jack that's in there is not a terrible headphone jack. And the headphone jacks that were in the early iPods were not terrible either. They put good DACs and amps inside of those devices. However, like the majority of the devices that Apple sells, I mean, their best-selling product, the iPhone, is not, you're never going to really have an easy way to do that. And I mean, the only company to put a high quality, at least in the US, the only company to put a high quality amp and DAC inside of their phone and leave the headphone jack was LG. And the problem, LG just didn't know how to sell a phone. So let's see. Moomin said, Moomin, I haven't seen you for a while either. MP3 sounds pretty good over a wire, at least at 192 kilobits. But Bluetooth always sounds processed to my ears. Yeah. And I mean, you have to think about what's happening when you go Bluetooth, right? I mean, it's taking the audio out, it's sending it through this protocol, and somehow through the air, it's then connecting to the headphones, and there is a process that has to happen there that takes the file and shrinks it down, and then tries to rebuild the file in some way with your codec or whatever when it gets over there. So yeah, it is very processed, and I've never heard anybody do a listening test between the two. See, that's one of the things that, like, it's really hard to talk about how audio sounds especially in a medium like this where, we can talk about what I hear but it's not what you hear. There are some basic standardized things that you can say, but I'd be interested to see, like Moomin's saying here, MP3s um, over wire can sound pretty good. And I mean, honestly, it doesn't even have to be 192 kilobits. A 320 megabits per second MP3 at 24-bit 44.1 even sounds pretty good. And a lot of people couldn't tell the difference from between that and lossless in the first place. So a lot of this is, I don't want to say it's sort of like talking to the tax man about poetry, but it's a lot of this is sort of academic to a certain extent. Most people who listen to stuff would not be able to tell the difference between a lossless file and a high quality lossy file. That doesn't mean that those customers should not have access to the best that the service has to offer if they're paying full price. And I mean, if you pay $550 for a pair of AirPods Max and you find out several months later that they can't give you the best possible audio quality, then I would be pissed. I would be pissed. So Rudy asks, can I listen to Tidal lossless in a Bluetooth headphone? Nope. There are a lot of people who pay that extra $10 per month for Tidal lossless and listen through Bluetooth, and maybe there's a placebo effect, but you're not. It's just not possible. You're talking about a big file versus a small file, and the protocol for Bluetooth can't send the big file across to your headphones, so it sends the small file, and that's what you get. And Insane Cloud Posse says the XM4s by Sony, the WH-1000 XM4s don't have lossless either. That's true. Most people feel like the XM4s, and Sony has the LDAC codec, which most people feel like comes closest to giving you a high quality hi-fi sound. But a lot of people also complain that there's issues with that codec in terms of stability and stuff like that as well. So yeah, nothing that you listen to through Bluetooth can give you lossless audio. You have to have wires for that. And even if somehow they figure out how to do it through AirPlay with Wi-Fi, it's going to be limited, and it's going to be even more confusing for the majority of people. So Michael says, I hope they bring it to the Android Music, Apple Music app. I'll use it with my LG G8 or LG Velvet. I don't see why I haven't heard one way or the other, but I don't see why they wouldn't. So, I mean, other than the fact that, yes, there are some Android phones that could actually play those files for people to enjoy. I don't know if the trade-off, I guess, would be that you wouldn't be able to do the spatial audio Dolby Atmos thing that they're going to be able to do, because you wouldn't be listening on a is it the H1 chip that does that processing, or the U1 chip? I can't remember. I think it's the H1 chip does that processing. And so if you're not listening to AirPods or something that has that H1 chip in it, then you won't be able to enjoy the spatial audio. But I'd rather have lossless than spatial audio personally, because I want to hear the music as intended by the artists and the folks who made the record, as opposed to, some sort of like enhancement that's being done by software. That to me is like maybe a fun experience, maybe kind of cool or something like that. But I want to hear the music as it's intended, as it was intended by the people who made the music. And a lossless audio file is as close as you're going to get to that in the digital world. And so not being able to do that and having spent over $1,000, it is a frustrating thing. It is a very frustrating thing. And I don't blame anybody who's frustrated about it. Gordy asks, if you listened to nothing but lossless for 6 months and went back to 320 kilobits per second, would you notice? Yes. Yes, you would. I mean, it's the same thing as if you listen to $1,000 pair of headphones and use no other headphones than that, and then went back to, like a decent pair of headphones, you would notice the difference for sure. Most definitely. Kayvon, you might want to. So Kayvon's saying that YouTube is not giving him notifications. If you're supposed to be on all notifications for the channel, I mean, I might check it again or click the bell again, because sometimes YouTube has unsubscribed people from channels. I've heard a lot of people talk about that. So if you're not getting the notifications and you're supposed to be, then be sure that you've got that bell still checked over on YouTube. I'll try not to make it. I'll try not to do the thing that I usually do, which is assume that there's some sort of conspiracy out to ruin my life. But yeah, I would check it out. Will lossless audio work with the Note 20 Ultra? Which headphones would be best for lossless? Well, the Note 20 Ultra, unfortunately, is the first of the Notes that didn't have a headphone jack, if I remember correctly. The Note 10 had a headphone jack, right? I might be misremembering. You could get lossless audio if you had a USB-C, some sort of USB-C DAC that then plugged into your wired headphones. That would get you lossless audio. USB-C is probably a much more forgiving port than the Lightning port would be in terms of the amount of bandwidth that USB-C can pass as opposed to Lightning. I mean, Lightning is an ancient connection at this point. So yeah, it'll take a couple of steps to get to lossless, but yes, the Note 20 will play lossless audio if you did that. The Note 10 didn't have a headphone jack, so was it the S10 that was the last with the headphone jack? Because I know it was like right around that time. Oh, geez, this is nice. Ansel says, I think you're getting fatter over the year. No offense, though. I still remember early days. Just look back for reference. Yes, I know I'm getting fatter. I call it my COVID-19. I have definitely gained weight over the course of the pandemic and not exercising as much as I should. I appreciate you pointing it out, though. That's awesome. So Apple could make a Lightning DAC. I don't think so, and I don't see why they would. Because they've already told us that plugging into a device is pointless, and within the next year or two, they're going to go portless anyway. They're not going to have a port on the iPhone at all. So yeah, I don't see them creating anything to solve the problem that they have not. Like they created the problem by taking away the headphone jack, and then they solved the problem by giving us AirPods, which then created the problem that AirPods couldn't deliver the best quality audio. So now they're back to square one, and I don't see them like backtracking when we know that they're going to go portless here in the next couple of years. Yeah, Thomas says that the notification stuff, I think, has changed over the last year or so, and has changed people's preferences to personalized or something like that. So if you want all of the goodness when it happens, then make sure that you've clicked that all notifications bell. And even then, you don't get all notifications, which is YouTube is stupid. But that's just how it is. Why is Apple releasing lossless audio without having any headphones from Apple that can do that? Yeah, that's the question. That's why it gets frustrating. And it's almost like they, Andrew was talking about this the other night, and his interpretation of the press release and where they talked about lossless audio versus where they talked about spatial audio. Andrew talked about this the other night, and to his reading, it meant that the spatial audio was the bigger deal. And honestly, like, I think if they had been able to put lossless audio through those headphones, then they would have led with lossless audio, and then spatial audio and Dolby Atmos would have been second. But since they couldn't, they buried lossless and led with what they could do. I mean, I guess that makes total sense, but at the same time, like, I think people are getting the impression that spatial audio and Dolby Atmos are better sounding options than lossless audio. And while they might be more noticeable or more exciting to listen to, lossless audio is categorically, by definition, the best possible audio that you can get from a digital file. It's lossless. So, Patrick, I don't take it as an insult. I mean, I don't know why anybody would point out the fact that I'm going to be 50 years old this year. I'm getting fatter. It's not making me happy, but I don't think he meant it as in any sort of like evil way. But then again, who knows? They will make AirPods Max Pro AirPlay enabled, $800. One thing that I would hope is that after this happens, that people would, do their homework and think twice before spending a ton of money on a pair of headphones like the AirPods Max. Now, the AirPods Max do sound good, and I stand by everything that I said in the reviews that I did of them and all that kind of stuff, but I do think that they are, and always have been, sort of a very hobbled product. They can do what they do well, and it's enough to say, hey, it sounds great. It's doing something that most headphones don't do, but it sounds great. But to me, a headphone that can't go all the way back down to the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of plugging a cable into a source and then plugging that cable into the headphones and getting, unaffected, non-AI, DSP, neural engine, blah, 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 affected music is a hobbled product. It's not a product that ultimately deserves to be put up in the same echelon as a product that can do those things, even if those products are wired headphones. So, spatial audio doesn't make huge sense to me, says Thomas. Most music isn't actually recorded with it. There's a large catalog of music that well, no, that's the thing. No music is recorded with spatial audio, and as far as I know, no music is recorded with Dolby Atmos. Well, that's not to say no music. I know that if you are a film composer and you're composing for film, and the soundtrack will be parsed out in Dolby Atmos, and that's the intended format, then you're mixing in a Dolby Atmos format, and that's. But any kind of like popular music is mixed in stereo. That's it. It's only been recent that studios have started to bring in subwoofers in the studio, and I still don't have one and don't want one because it's way too easy to get. It's way too easy to get a false sense of what you're really hearing when you have that going on. I mean, so no, there's no spatial audio version of any. So what's happening is Apple is taking the stereo file and they are putting it through their DSP, their digital signal processing, to create a spatial audio version inside of the headphones. That's that's where it's happening. Um, so I doubt that, since spatial audio is a proprietary thing, it's not going to become an industry standard by any stretch of the imagination. And honestly, if you if you wanted to hear spatial audio for real, you could go out and buy a really expensive stereo system, uh, and have your room treated, even just moderately treated for acoustics, and a really great stereo system will give you a sense of spatial audio. I've done it all the time. If you position your speakers right, the speakers disappear, and then you have spatial audio, but it's not created by software. Bushin with a $20 USD super chat. Thank you very much. Jason in chat, I see you want true lossless audio from your iPhone. I'm happy with DTSX on LG. What music movies would you listen to with it? And you look great. Just feel positive. Thank you. I appreciate that. For me, there's some things that are recorded really well that I like to hear in the best possible scenario, and some things that maybe weren't, like, you know a lot of punk rock records from the 80s and 90s and 70s were not made in the best studios in the world, nor were they played with the best equipment or recorded on the best microphones, et cetera, et cetera. So there are places in the signal chain that have already broken down. So I don't know that I need to hear lossless Sex Pistols, let's say, but lossless, like lossless Beatles remix, yes, absolutely. Like those remixes that they've been doing with the Beatles. Giles Martin has been doing those remixes. I think now it's Abbey Road, White Album, and Sgt. Pepper's. Those lossless would be fantastic. So I would love to hear those lossless. It really depends. Classical music almost demands lossless if you're an aficionado of classical music. In terms of films, everybody's got their favorite films, but for me, films like Blade Runner, and any of the Christopher Nolan movies, lots of Saving Private Ryan is fantastic in like high quality audio. So there's a lot of stuff that you could listen to to really enjoy it. But I think one thing that people often forget is that the signal starts way before it gets to your device and goes through your amp and your DAC and then into your headphones. The signal starts with a person standing in front of a microphone and singing, or plugging into an amplifier and playing, or sitting on a stage and bowing their violin. That's where the signal starts. And everything that happens from that signal to the microphone, to the mixing board, through whatever cable they're using. Is it a good cable? Is it a bad cable? Does that matter? Everybody argues about it. Into the preamp, into whatever they're recording to, be it digital or analog tape, and then onward and onward and onward through the mixing process and all the processing that happens there, to the mastering studio and everything that happens there, right? And then everything that happens to it afterwards. So there's just so many alterations of the original signal that happen before it ever gets to your player. And sometimes those alterations, are better. Sometimes those alterations are subjectively worse. But music is not necessarily like, I said this in the stream the other day, the performance of music can be enjoyed and have its desired effect on the listener, whether you're listening through like a tiny little tin can Bluetooth speaker or a $20,000 stereo system. You can have the desired effect of a piece of music, to be emotionally connected to it and for it to move you in some way. That effect can be had on any piece of end user equipment. But For those who really have trained their ears, who really like to listen to audio and hear all the detail and pick out everything, there's no end to the the amount of money, the amount of navel gazing you could do to get there. And to me, like, if Apple is going to do something like introduce lossless audio to a much wider audience than has ever had access to lossless audio, and then add insult to the process by not selling a product that actually can reproduce that audio, that to me is sort of a travesty. And I hope that this new focus on lossless, high quality digital audio will make people more interested in how you can actually listen to that stuff and enjoy it and take part in what it means to listen to that stuff than bitching about the fact that the AirPods Max can't play it. So, I mean, that's part of the reason that I made the video that I did yesterday, is that if people want to get into the whole lossless audio thing on a ground floor kind of beginner basis, I mean, the Philips SHP 9500 plus the FiiO E10K DAC, you're spending $150 and you're getting pretty close to audiophile territory. Now, $75 headphones and $75 DAC is not the best that you can get, but they both play well above their pay grade. So you can check that out and see if it's for you. And once you get used to doing that, then you can and you want to hear more, you want to experience more, then there are just so many steps that you can go up the ladder. Like, there are people who have like $10,000 speaker cables between their speaker and the amp. The cables themselves. You can get like super ridiculous about this, and whether or not it's possible to hear any kind of like difference between one cable and the other is often debatable. And as somebody said just a second ago, most people couldn't tell the difference. But to me, that's like an opportunity. This is an opportunity to learn to be able to tell the difference. Like, so Ryan says, I'm quite positive that most folks can't even tell the difference with lossless versus lossy. I can't tell a lot of the time either. Yeah, I mean, depending on the recording, there's a lot of things that go into it. I mean, if you try and listen to a recording that is naturally kind of messy and then try and pick out which one is lossy and which one is lossless, unless you know exactly what to listen to in order to be able to tell, then it's really hard. Like, there are places that I focus when I try and listen for the difference between, fidelities, or when I'm trying to mix something. I listen for clearer enunciation in vocals. I listen to the snare drum, and snare drums don't always have depth, but I found on better recordings, snare drums are more three-dimensional than usual. And I listen for reverb tails, like, when you have a reverb signal and you can hear it tail out and decay. If I can hear that really clearly, those are some of the places I first start to listen in order to be able to sort of figure out what I'm listening to, whether it's the quality of the stereo system that I'm listening to, or the quality of the file that I'm listening to, or the headphones or whatever. I start to listen for those specific things. And I think it's important that you have, when you try and train your ears, you learn what to listen for in what frequency ranges. The upper mid range is great for vocals, and guitar sort of live one on top of the other in the upper mid range. So if you're listening to a guitar record and you want to know how well it's recorded or how well what the source is, then really listen to that guitar and see how much definition you can pull out of it just by parsing it through your own brain. Um, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I have like stuff that I listen for throughout the frequency range, and I have a list of stuff that um, I have a list of songs that I use that I know well enough and I've used to test things for long enough that I can make an objective decision about what I'm hearing, because I know what it's supposed to sound like within a certain range. I'm familiar enough with the material to say I know it's supposed to sound like this, so when I listen to these headphones I hear more of this or less of that, etc., etc. So it is it is a weird thing, but I mean, I don't know. I've just always kind of geeked out about it. Uh, KG says, I'm not an audio guy. I love Floyd and many others, but the standard isn't a massive deal. However, bringing this out when your products don't actually support it is just imbecilic. I don't disagree with you. The thing is, like, if you're a huge Pink Floyd fan and you haven't had a means to listen to Pink Floyd in its, listen to Dark Side of the Moon is the one that everybody talks about. So if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the Dark Side of the Moon record with at its highest possible quality, and all of a sudden here's Apple, they drop that into your lap, and then you've put out the money to get their best headphones, and those best headphones they sell can't do it, I would be frustrated for sure. Even if I'm not like a quote unquote audiophile. I mean, to me, audiophile doesn't have anything to do with audio, if that makes any sense. Once you become an audiophile, it's as much about the equipment and the sort of nerdy discussion and everything else that goes along with it. The music is something, separate, and audio, like being an audiophile, is a hobby, right? But it doesn't have a lot to do with listening to music. You can appreciate music and not be an audiophile. You can appreciate good equipment versus bad equipment and not be an audiophile. So audiophile has its own connotations and meanings, whereas like if you say you're a hi-fi enthusiast, which is a phrase that I like to use, then you just really enjoy good sounding music on good sounding equipment and don't really care about all of the just like, you care about it to the extent of like, it's always there's always something else, but are you happy with what you've got? I mean, in the tech world, most people aren't. So that's the thing. Let's see. What time is it? It's 1:00. I have to wait. Let me see if my wife texted. I'm supposed to take the dog to the vet at 1:30. I think I think she did. So, but I gotta go in a second just to make sure. John Darko did a great video on what is an audiophile, and the results are surprising. Yeah. I think that people who aren't in that world have a certain anticipation or a certain expectation for what audiophiles really are, and what they look for and what they care about. But since I mean, it's the same thing as, I don't know, being a high level bowler. You make certain things about bowling. You have certain expectations about what a high level bowler might be like, but you don't bowl at a high level yourself, so you can't really know, if that makes any sense. But to me, audiophile is not really as it is a music thing, but it's also not a music thing. It's a gear thing as well. It's a fetish, like, everybody who buys a car that can go 300 miles an hour is not a race car driver, right? So is Tidal going to die now? I don't I don't think so. I don't I don't think so. However, I will say that I have used Tidal several times over the years that it's been around because um I do want to have the high quality audio available to me. However, Tidal's um I guess their discovery algorithm is really terrible. And so if I use Tidal for a month, it should start to get a sense of what I want to see when I open up the app, right? But still, when I open up the app and it's on the Tidal like splash page, it's showing me like stuff that I've never listened to and I would never want to listen to, like the latest pop stuff and all that kind of thing. I don't know if those people pay to be on that front page and therefore they have to show that, but I found that it's much easier for me to discover music and to find the stuff that is in my collection but I don't have MP3s of. It's much easier for me to do that on Apple Music or even Spotify now. Spotify's gotten like tons and tons better than they used to be about their discovery algorithm. Um, it's and to me that's the important thing about a streaming service is like how well does it help you find music that you want to listen to, because when you're faced with the idea that like, oh, here we are, we've got every song ever created, what do you want to hear? It's very hard to parse that out and boil it down. Like, you know most people don't have their CD collections out anymore or anything like that. So do you think of that obscure record that you bought 20 years ago that you really liked but you haven't heard since then? No. But like um, the other day, Spotify surfaced Big Star, which is one of my favorite bands ever, but I haven't listened to Big Star in a long time. And all of a sudden there was Big Star, and I'm like, oh, I'm so happy that they did that. So the discovery algorithms of these services are what are really important. And if Tidal doesn't get better at that, and Apple Music and Spotify and Amazon all have high quality audio options, then Tidal might die. Yeah, um, because they won't have that one thing that makes them unique that a lot of people will suffer through in order to get that high quality sound. So once people have choice, they'll go to the best one, whatever that might be. And we don't know what Spotify is going to do next. We don't know. I mean, Amazon's had their high quality thing for a while, but now it's no longer an added cost. So you've got that going on. So there's going to be a lot of options, and people are going to make their choices based on what they want. Now, like Amazon got in touch with me about being a brand ambassador for Amazon HD. And I don't know if I want to do it. I haven't used that service a ton. And the only real exposure that I've had to Amazon's music stuff is through using an Echo device, and it's not the same as what their music service is. So I don't know. It's weird. Roger says, so anyone using Tidal or what is it? Cubase? I've never had to say that out loud. So on the iPhone with their Bluetooth headphones have been paying for Lossless but never hearing it. That is correct, sir. That is correct. I should do a video on that. Shouldn't I? I should do a video on the fact that, like, if you're listening to high quality audio with Bluetooth headphones and you're paying for it, then you're not really getting it, because that's a good scam. That's a good scam. One thing that might come out of Apple bringing this to the table is that people will become a little bit more educated and realize, what they really want out of audio. It used to be with digital, when digital audio first started, it wasn't as good as anything else, but it was convenient. And so the convenience factor is what you really cared about. And then it started to get better. And then it got to a point that was good enough that most people can't tell the difference, so nobody cares. But now Apple's raising the stakes by saying, hey, we'll give you the best possible quality that you can get. And that's going to make some people start to think like, oh, can I hear that? Does it make a big difference? Do I care? or whatever. And I just don't think a lot of people who've grown up with digital media have put a lot of thought into like fidelity. And by fidelity, I mean, how fidelity in terms of how much fidelity does it have to its original source material? Like how closely does it resemble that original source material? And so that's what they mean by high fidelity. It's like, is it highly representative of its original source material? So, yeah, 10 common mistakes by people who are getting into high-res audio. That's a good, that's a good one. Yeah, I probably number one would be like spending too much money, I would think, because that's sort of the way that it would work, right? You think like, oh, well, I want to hear everything that there is to this, so I'm going to buy $1,000 worth of stuff. And that's not necessarily gonna actually that's not necessarily actually gonna get you there. So there are ways to. One thing that people have been saying in the comments of the video that I put up yesterday is that Drop has the HD6XX, which are basically the HD650s that I recommended, but they're only like $200. And I love Drop. They've sent me stuff. I have a great relationship with them. And so, yeah, those are really great. But I always like to recommend like the real thing. The difference between the stuff that Drop sells and the real thing is, sometimes the quality of some of the materials, et cetera, et cetera. They cut corners just a little bit to get to a certain price point. And usually that doesn't make a huge difference. But if I had my druthers, I'd still have, an HD 650 as opposed to an HD 6XX. But, a $300 savings is hard to argue with when, you're probably not really going to be able to tell that big a difference between the two. So, I remember quadraphonic stereo. I remember, like, you guys remember Super Audio, what was it? Super Audio CDs, SACDs, which were supposedly somehow better. The first CDs were poorly mastered because they didn't know what they were doing. It was a brand new thing. So Moomin says CDs used 44.1 kilohertz, PCM wave, and DVD audio was usually 48 AC3. Yes, that's true. Could never hear the difference in quality between 44.1 16-bit and 48 16-bit. Yes, that's absolutely true. And I mean, honestly, CD quality, quote unquote, 44.1 16-bit is really, really good. And you're never gonna listen to a CD quality, full fat CD quality file and be like, oh, that sounds terrible, unless the recording itself or the mastering or whatever is terrible. Like, it's painful. Husker Du, one of my favorite bands of all time. I love them so much, but their records sound like garbage, and it just makes it hard to listen to their records because they're just, they were made poorly and mastered poorly. Genosis says, I got the HD 600s on Father's Day last year because of the quality control insurance. You could pick up the official cans for only $100 or less in the US. Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. The the HD 800s, those are some pricey cans right there. Yes, I'm sure that Dark Side of the Moon was probably one of the first things to come out on Super Audio CD, um, without a doubt. Um, I I got a pair of HD 800s. Like Sennheiser sent me a pair to borrow. Like they're not, and I did a review of them, and this was a long time ago on the channel. Um, and I remember not really having anything that could properly drive them, so I couldn't really make a good call on whether I liked them or not. Um, but at the same time, like I didn't enjoy them all that much. But it's hard to say. Again, like I didn't have a beefy amp and or anything like that that would really do justice to them. So, Winston, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for hanging out, and thank you for being a listener for a long time. I appreciate it, man, very much. Yeah, so the HD6XX are 200ish, and on sale the HD600. Yeah, HD600s like are about $400 regular retail, but you can get them for $3. I think when I got them for $3, and the HD650s used to be like 50 or $100 more. But then like the HD650s that I saw when I was doing the video the other day on Amazon were $500. I don't know if that's an inflation, but yeah. Kayvon got an SACD player from Goodwill for $10. That is that's I went through a period where I would go to Goodwill and I would go to like, some of these quote unquote antique shops and stuff like that and just pick up old audio gear. And I just had so much of it. And it ultimately I was just filling up my house. Like I didn't have enough places to put all of it. And, it's a pain in the rear end to switch things out. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm like trying to stay on one computer system, because I never get any work done if I'm always switching things out. So I've tried to stay away from Goodwill, but if I found an SACD player for $10, I would buy it for sure. Mr. Deja Vu King asked, like 4K and 8K and 12K and all that stuff, is it possible to predict where high-res audio is going, like video codecs, 10-bit, 12-bit? Yeah. I don't know, because at the end of the day, like, here's a dirty secret. The majority of people who go into a studio to record, unless they're going into like a really high level studio, a studio that costs like, a couple of $1,000s a day or something like that, and has really expensive equipment. Most people are recording at 24-bit, 48K. That's what most people record at. So you could make the argument that it doesn't matter if you get up to 192 kilohertz because it wasn't recorded at that, so you're upscaling. And ultimately I don't think that it's going to change that much unless the entire method of recording itself changes. Because I remember when digital recording was first becoming a thing in the late 90s and early 2000s. When it first became a thing, it was really hard. Like the computer that you needed in order to really be able to do it in a stable way, it was, you were looking at a more expensive Mac, because Windows computers at the time didn't really have it's not that they couldn't do audio, but most of the programs like ran better or were built for Macs, right? So you've got a Mac that's more expensive than your typical PC. You've got the equipment was much more expensive. Like now, you can get a Mac Mini, and one of these brand new M1 Mac Minis, or even the older Mac Minis that like had i5 chips in them. You could record 64 tracks all at once if you wanted to. You could run, multiple instances of all your stuff. So you had like virtual instruments or whatever. Back just like 20 years ago, that was impossible. And so in 20 years, we've come so far that almost anything is possible with audio. And I don't know that like the human ear can only hear so much. And I think at this point we've covered that spectrum of hearing to such an extent, to such a level of detail, that I don't know that there's anything out there that's going to be better, if that makes any sense. I also want to try the Moondrop aria. um, yeah, Michael's making a good point. When I was in high school in the 90s, we had to save up and buy a 4-track cassette player to record music. Oh, I know. And 4-tracks were not cheap. I mean, 4-tracks were, $400-500 in the 90s, which is like $2,000 or $3,000 now. So they weren't cheap for sure. And then you had to have microphones, and a lot of 4-track machines didn't have preamps, so it was hard to record stuff. But then all of a sudden, the 2000s hit and digital music started to happen, and it just took off. I mean, digital music was happening earlier, but it became accessible to the average mortal could buy a digital audio interface and run Logic or Pro Tools or Digital Performer or something like that. And maybe for a few $1,000s you could have a decent at-home setup that you could make your recordings. So it's one of those things where it's come so far in such a short amount of time that it's almost difficult to remember what it was like. Well, I mean, there's a whole generation of people at this point who never stepped foot in a quote unquote real studio, one that had a real 48 or 24 track mixing desk that had built-in preamps and cost $120,000 with a 24-inch tape machine and all of the outboard gear. Like, all of that stuff lives in the computer now. And so there are just generations of people now that have never listened to or never heard the real thing, right? They've never heard the real gear. So what I see right now is, first, all of the plugins, all of everything did a really good job of modeling what the old gear sounded like. But now I see a lot of people moving back toward buying at least like a select few pieces of analog gear that they use as a front end to go into the computer, and then use plugins from there. Like, my most recent purchase was a Neve 1073 clone into a clone of a 1176 compressor that goes into this microphone. And there's just something about physical, like transistors and resistors and all of the things that this signal has to go through to get back up into here. It does something that can't be fully recreated. It can be faked, and most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but there is some lo-fi charm in the. Well, you know what? It's funny. I had a 4-track up until I had a 4-track, and I planned on using it kind of as like not something to record in, but I just wanted to run things through it to get some tape compression and maybe use it as a tape delay from time to time. But I never ended up really using it, and so I got it for $150 on eBay, and it was a 424 Mark III, a Tascam 424 Mark III. And so eventually I sold it, and I sold it for what I paid for it. So I thought, oh, great. But these days, if you go on Reverb or if you go on eBay, you can't buy even the 4 tracks that nobody wanted back 10 years ago. You can't buy them for less than $300 or $400. Like, there are 4 track tape machines that are costing like $2,000 used, and those things are like 30 years old. So yeah, the lo-fi thing is coming back. If you look around on YouTube, you'll find a lot of people who are using 4 tracks and having like what they call DAWless, like digital audio workstation, free, like no computer setups. So they have synths and they have drum machines and they have live instruments and they have a 4 track or something like that. And they're just making music that way. And it's really cool. It's really cool. So, but it's also like, as Thomas says here, and this is a really good point. Everything was simpler before the digital era. It's sort of like the same thing with streaming services. Like, you can listen to anything. So what do you listen to? For me, I end up listening to the same things because I could never think of like what it was that I used to like to listen to because it's not already in my collection, right? So a lot of times in the digital era, you have every possible option in the world, and it makes it impossible to choose what you're going to do. So you get analysis paralysis and you just never get anything done. And that's kind of like, I've been stuck in that place with my music for a decade at this point. I mean, I fiddle around with stuff and I put stuff out here and there. And, I've got the channel that I have where I put up covers of stuff and that sort of thing. But I haven't just bared down and made a record in 10 years. I have probably 3 records worth of stuff to do. But I just haven't finished anything because it's hard to make those final choices. It used to be if you went into a studio and you were paying for the time, then you only had an X amount of dollars. So whatever you walked out of the studio with was your record, right? And that was it. You had no more dollars. But now you have like all the dollars and all the time, and it's impossible to really force yourself to make choices. Okay, Bushin's got 2 more questions, and after these 2 more, Techmoan channel is great, Moomin, by the way. I love his channel. His videos are long-lived. I don't watch as many because I don't like to spend like 25 minutes on a YouTube video. But anyway, I'm going to answer Bushin's questions here, and then I'm going to be done because if I was supposed to take the dog at 1:30, I'm in trouble. Last 2 questions. Do you still own a turntable? Yes, I have 4 turntables in the house right now. Only 2 of them are functional, and I've sort of turned them both into like Franken turntables. So yes. Why do you think Target are selling not only record players but a lot of records? I think that, well, Barnes and Noble's been selling records and like Crosley turntables and stuff like that for probably like 8 or 10 years at this point. I think people, that like there's a younger generation, them youngins, the Gen Z folks, I guess they are, have enjoyed. It's kind of like it's old timey to them to go out and get records, and it's they're a generation who never grew up with any kind of physical medium to listen to their music on, right? So the whole act of having a turntable and having a record player and having records and then like sitting down and dropping the needle on them and you got to sit there and listen. I think that speaks to something really unavailable in the digital age. Like, one thing that gets me a lot is the fact that with smartphones and computers and everything like that, you can keep your brain running at like 6,000 RPMs, right? But if you want to sit down and read a book or listen to a record or something like that, you've got to like gear down and slow down and bring the RPMs of your brain down to really be able to focus. And so there's not much in the world anymore that gives you that opportunity to sort of slow your brain down and focus. And so like reading, listening to music, doing some sort of hobby or craft or something like that. Um, all of those things force you to think differently than I think a lot of kids have been able to do for a long time. So I think that's part of it. And also it's cool. I don't think Franklin's not entirely wrong, that the hipsters are responsible for new vinyl popularity. I mean, quite honestly, vinyl is still one of the best ways to listen to music. And the funny thing is, it doesn't have any of the same kind of fidelity that like a lossless digital file at a high bit rate would have, right? It part of what makes vinyl sound great is that the sort of noise that's happening in and around all of the frequencies, because basically you're getting some like some frequency clash that happens. And that's when people say vinyl sounds warm and it glues things together. It's that sort of those frequencies sort of overlapping one another, and it's not something that's easy to like pick out or say, but that's what gives it that quality, and that's why people say vinyl sounds great. And vinyl and a tube amp is always great. I had a solid state amp from a company called Accu something. They used to work at Pioneer, and then they started their own company, and this thing was a tank. It weighed, I'm not kidding, 45 pounds. And it was just an integrated amp. And man, it was so good. I kick myself for selling this stuff, but when you want to have your stereo in the same place as your TV, then you have to start then you either listen to everything in stereo or you AccuFace. Thank you, Pro AC guy. Thank you. Oh man, I had it like right in my head. I could see the logo. I couldn't read it. AccuPhase. Yeah, I had this AccuPhase amp. It was so amazing. And yeah, solid. See, that's tube stuff can be really great, but solid state stuff from a time when stuff was really well made can also have incredibly great quality as well. So I'm not strictly a tube person, but yeah, AccuPhase was fantastic. If you have like a I don't know, flea market kind of shop or something like that in your area, then go down there and see if they carry like used audio gear. Like used stereo stuff. Sometimes you'll find like really crappy surround sound systems from like the early 2000s or whatever. Sometimes you'll find really great pieces, and most of the time these people know what they are and they've had them serviced and they're ready to go. But yeah, you can build yourself a really great system with an amp and a turntable and some good old speakers. You can build an incredible system for $300 or $400. If you hit things right. Look on Craigslist, look on Facebook Marketplace, and start to learn like what speakers and what amps and turntables are worth considering. And you can build yourself a really kick-ass system used for a lot of just like not very much money at all. That would be another good video, like buying used equipment and building yourself an amazing stereo system. So anyway, I do have to go, guys. Thank you so much for the stream today. Good to talk to all of you. Hope you have a great weekend. More videos. I think I got a video coming out yesterday. Or not yesterday. I had a video out yesterday. I have a new video coming out tomorrow, and then I'll be back again on Monday with some new stuff. So keep an eye out. And now that everybody's talking about audio, I think I'm going to keep pushing PHT in this audio direction, and we'll see where it goes. Anyway, once again, guys, as you know, my name's Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech Live.